Welcome to the Sales Leader Roundtable, a show where we explore, share, and learn about trends in leadership and sales acumen. A place that provides our audience valuable insights, advice, and best practices from trusted members of the sales leadership community. Now, let's welcome KENDLEY Davenport and Jim DIEBOLD to this episode of the Sales Leader Roundtable.
Hey, Jim, here we go again for our April roundtable discussion. I'm so excited for today's broadcast.
Me too, KENDLEY. Looking forward to it.
Well, I just want to thank our audience. Welcome, everyone, to the Sales Leader Roundtable TV and radio broadcast. We are so appreciative of Dr. Jacqueline and the USA Global TV for trusting us with this time slot each month. We're having a fantastic time sharing information about leadership. You know, what is the Sales Leader Roundtable all about? It's our show. We explore topics in leadership and sales acumen from some of the leading thought leaders in this space. Our goal is to bring you actionable and practical information that allows you to immediately grow your teams or your leadership skill set. Hello, everyone. My name is KENDLEY Davenport. I'm your co-host along with Jim DIEBOLD. Jim, say hello to our audience today.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. KENDLEY, I'm really excited and intrigued by this very interesting topic we have today.
Excellent. I know that I am as well, and I can't wait to get him introduced. Why don't you introduce our upcoming guest?
Yeah, thanks, KENDLEY. Today we have Michael Hoffman with us. And Michael is a highly regarded international executive coach and mentor for top leaders in organizations around the world. Michael's former career as a symphony orchestra conductor and composer has undoubtedly made a large contribution to his keen ability to think outside the box. A pioneer in the area of lean for knowledge workers, his company LeanMail has for the past 15 years successfully enabled thousands of Outlook users to get control over their inbox in hundreds of companies, including the Fortune 100 on 6 continents. Born in New York of Dutch and American parents, Michael holds degrees from the University of Southern California, Arizona State University, and the University of Lund in Sweden. While LeanMail is based in Copenhagen, Michael resides in Barcelona. So let's welcome Michael to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Really great to be here. Thank you very much, KENDLEY, for inviting me.
We're so glad to have you. As I told you, your topic is something I've really been really looking forward to. You know, from your topic of from Symphony Conductor to executive coach, and the surprising link between leadership and music and business is just, I think, a fascinating area to explore with you today. And I got really excited about it when we talked earlier, Michael, because I had the pleasure back in my career to actually attend a live orchestra for which they did a motivational process like I think we're going to discuss today, where they made the link between team building, between leadership, and between business, and how conductors think about that in order to create the greatest experience they can when they're conducting music. So I'm really excited about getting involved in this today.
Oh, great. Me too.
Yeah, and as a trumpet player, I'm excited myself. So this is going to be fun, Michael.
That's
so
right.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here, with what I think is kind of an obvious question. What skills did you learn as a conductor that are transferable to executive coaching?
Actually, nothing. There's nothing that's tying those two things together. I'm kidding, of course. So
Love it.
I guess the most obvious one would be listening, right? Because as a conductor, you're listening so intently all the time. You're actively listening to everything that's going around you, and there's so much happening. Remember, you can have between 40 and 120, even more musicians, and you have to listen to everything and adjust things in real time. So that makes you a professional listener. So as a coach, obviously, I need those types of skills in a little bit of a different way. But at the same time, I could say that each individual that I coach has their own sound, differently from, let's say, a trumpet or an oboe or something like that. But they have a certain way of communicating, and I learn about their sound, and I know what is going to be the way they are, what they should be sounding like, and when they're off track, when they're in their ego, when they're doing things that they wouldn't find appropriate for themselves. So I'm constantly listening for those things. Another thing that is very important to conducting is analysis. So a lot of people don't think about this. When the conductor is not on stage, they're off in some quiet room poring over the scores in so many different ways. That can be a rhythmic analysis, it can be tonal analysis, it can be harmonic analysis, all these different ways of understanding the music. And so as a coach and also as a leader, there's so much analysis there as well, right? So I would say those two things. Also, anticipation is really important. As a conductor, you know the score, you know where the music is going to go. There are no surprises in that way, but still you're anticipating where the music is going to go, and you have to show this to the orchestra. You have to show it before it happens to the orchestra. You have to cue them in a certain way that says piano, or cue them in a certain way that says leggero. And the same thing when I'm listening to a leader, I'm listening for the subtleties in their language, their vocabulary, in order to know when I should say something, when I should pose a facilitative question, when I should help them out and bring new things, hopefully helping them see new things about themselves.
Jim, I'm blown away by his 3 words. I mean, something that I think we talk about at Sales Leader Roundtable when we're talking about other leaders, Michael, sales leaders specifically, listening, analysis, and participation. I just love the way we sometimes use other words for it, but gosh, that's just dead on, isn't it, Jim?
100%. I got to tell you, if this was a 3.5-minute show, I would already feel like we got everything out of it that we needed. Because truthfully,
it's late here in Barcelona, so I got to get going, guys.
But that was really insightful. And again, being a musician myself, at least from background, that was an awesome analogy between correlating the skills as a composer and conductor to being an executive coach. I thought that was awesome. So then I think the natural follow-up to that is, please provide an example to us of a time when you use that conducting experience to help a client.
Oh, well, I mean, there are so many.
Favorite.
One of the things, since you're a trumpet player, I'm just thinking, because as you know, I started out as a trumpet player. I played trumpet for 20 years. And I switched over to conducting after doing some work on, in any event, one of the things that I talk about with my clients is that you have to give it your all. You have to try your best and be as perfect as you can in all the various situations. But the moment that you err, the moment you make a small mistake, you have to give it up. And I think about the times when I was a trumpet player, and trumpet is a kind of difficult instrument in that it's quite easy to make a mistake, or what we call a splee.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you'll be coming in, it can happen quite often as a symphony orchestra trumpet player, you wait around a long time and your chops get cold. And your lips, we call them chops. And so you might have to come in on a very high note. And I remember I was playing the I think it was the Chopin piano concerto, and the trumpet comes in the second movement very high and very quietly. And, of course you practice a lot to make this happen, but then you miss the note. Yeah. And the worst thing that you can do is think about it.
Yeah.
So it's about doing all the preparation you possibly can, but then if you blow it, you got to keep moving. And I think that's very important. It's just an agile way of thinking, right? You make those mistakes, but keep going, keep going, keep going. So that's one way that I think I can use my experience for that. But another thing that I often say to my clients is practice like you perform and perform like you practice. And what that means is whatever situation you're in, it's a performance. You may be just talking to some people in a Teams meeting. You may be talking to some direct reports. The vocabulary you use counts. Don't wait for some big event to all of a sudden be professional. You must be a professional every moment you're live. From the moment you wake up, get up out of bed. And that doesn't mean you can't kid around and have fun. That's also a part of it. But you're performing.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't forget that.
I love those. Those are great insights. And you're right about the errors, because let's say, I don't even know, Michael, how many times in a year does a symphony tend to perform or practice? It's constant.
It's constant, right? Yes. It's
so
4 or 5 days a week.
Inevitably, yeah. So inevitably those errors are going to happen. And just like errors are going to happen in business, and you just take it in stride, learn from the error, move forward. And like you said, just keep moving forward. So I love that analogy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you said something just really, really important. And you talked about practice, right? And you used the example of how a symphony practices a whole lot before that performance. And we can see it in sports a lot. It's easy to follow that line of thinking when you're thinking about an athlete, right? Or even a race car driver or something of that nature. But I think, often forget in sales leadership or even executive leadership, if you're the CEO of a company, you sort of don't think of the CEO of practicing. But it's been my experience when I've watched and listened and read books about other CEOs and other people of great success in the world of business. They practice. They don't take anything for granted. And I think mid-America and a lot of people working up the ladder start to think as they climb the ladder, practice is not as necessary, when probably it's more necessary. Talk to me about how does a conductor practice?
So unfortunately, a conductor doesn't have an orchestra to practice on when they're practicing away, right? So basically what we're doing is we have the music in our mind, and we're going through that, and we're thinking about how the music should sound. And sometimes we'll tinkle on a piano, and sometimes, basically that's what I was doing. I would sometimes play some lines on a piano, but you really have to do that all within your head. So it requires an enormous amount of concentration to do that. But that's just the gig. That's how it is for a conductor. You have to have a very good inner ear and an understanding of how things should sound.
Well, I think good CEOs and good leaders are doing that, in their day-to-day work, as you just talked about. Hey, here's another question for you. Can you talk about a situation where you had to adapt your leadership style as the conductor, and how that has impacted your approach to coaching executives and helping others think about this?
Well, as soon as you said that, I thought about an experience I had with the St. Petersburg Philharmonic. This is many years ago now. And it was the first time I was conducting a Russian orchestra. And I got up in front of the orchestra, and I was a greenhorn still. I was a young guy, young conductor. That means around 35 years old, by the way. So maybe not that young, but as a conductor, that's a pretty young age. And I got up in front of the orchestra, and I gave the downbeat, and nothing happened. And I was freaking, and I was looking for the exit. I had over 100 people in front of me. We're talking about, 4,000 years of experience in this orchestra. And I brought my downbeat down on a piece that was written for this orchestra. It's called Romeo and Juliet. I'm sure you know this piece by Tchaikovsky. And I didn't know what to do. And so after the second time, the cellist to my right said, "Keep going." And so the third time I did this, I just kept going, even though the orchestra didn't respond. And then all of a sudden they responded, and I understood at that point that they respond so much later than a European orchestra or an American orchestra. And I had no clue about this. So, I made it through that rehearsal, and I went back to the hotel room, and I thought, I'm going to have to memorize everything because I need all my concentration to make sure that I adjust to this, because it was really, really quite difficult. And, long story short, I made it through all these rehearsals, and it was an amazing concert, and I'll never forget it. It was fantastic. And what was very difficult about it also made it extremely special, because you can do things when you have a time lag like that you can't do when things are direct. Right? You can express certain things in that small amount of time that you can't do otherwise. And so, when I think about an executive and what that could mean for them, and I'm thinking, you simply have to adjust to what's going on around you. You do not have the control that you always want. And there is no running for the exit. So you can try to use a forceful method. And I can tell you that if I had tried to use some sort of a method where I say, hey, listen, guys, this is how I've learned to conduct in the university, and this is how we're going to do it today, probably I would have gotten zero respect from them and had a mediocre, we probably would have gone through the concert, they probably would have followed me, but it would probably have been a mediocre performance and I wouldn't have learned anything. But by doing it their way, I had to study up, I had to do everything in my powers to make that happen and make it work. And I learned so much, and it was a fantastic concert. And I think that's what it's all about, is being able to adjust immediately. Again, it's a very agile way of thinking, agile way of working.
That's amazing to me, because I often in my practice, as you know, I do leadership capacity building for companies, and I have to remind young leaders, particularly, and even sometimes executive leaders, that your team doesn't adjust to you, you adjust to the team. And I think that's what I heard you just mention in your own way about being agile and being listening, and to get the most out of them, the most out of that orchestra, you have to adapt your style to theirs. It's not the
Absolutely.
other way around.
The Reiners and the Toscaninis, they're gone, right? There is no a big chief who's going to say, this is how we do things anymore. No, it's a collaboration. And we need the servant leader types, right?
It's funny how that this fits a conductor so easily. It's something you don't think about too often.
It's interesting when you were describing that about the group. I thought about the comment you made at the beginning of this broadcast regarding each leader has their own sound. Well, in this case, the whole group had their own sound, if you will, their own way of doing things. You're in a different place, so you're learning that sound, right? Within that bigger organization, we do things a little bit differently than a similar organization. So to use your words, being agile is very, very important.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up sound again, because it's so important in an organization. The sound of the organization. You could make an analogy of culture, right? The sound is the culture. And better than working on the technical part of an organization, working on the sound of the organization is a faster way to go, because everybody can hear that. Everybody hears what a good sound sounds like. Sure. They may not know exactly technically how to do that, but they know that. So if you're talking about that sound, they all have something that they can connect with. And so that's really important, the sound.
Love that. Speaking of sound, that's kind of like the sound of communication, Michael. So how do you think how do you leverage your experience as a conductor to help executives improve their communication skills?
Well, that's a really tough question, because it's a little bit general, and it's going to depend upon so many different variables. Most of the leaders that I work with are expert communicators. So it's not a question so much about little tricks for them, performance tricks and things like that. It's more about helping them be more of themselves in the same way that an actor who is acting on stage, it's not, we can always tell when somebody's acting, right?
Sure.
They lose their authenticity. So it's about bringing up the energy and also taking the ego out of things. Because typically when a leader has challenges, it's often with their own ego, and they feel like they have to be a certain way, be a certain person, instead of getting more involved in their own ways of doing things, their own values, and having those things come out. So on the other hand, I have had some leaders that have had some problems working with direct reports or even working with their teams. And sometimes I will talk about transactional analysis, which is a way of understanding how we work, how we work with the different roles that we have within ourselves. We talk about different ego states, such as the parent, the adult, and the child. And if we can see how we're relating to people in these different roles, then we have a way of also understanding the way people are interpreting what we're saying to them. So there are lots of different tools and that I can use to help the various leaders understand how to communicate better. So
that makes sense, Michael. As I think about what you shared right there, and I'm envisioning a symphony at the moment, and the conductor being the president or CEO, and then the strings, I don't know, maybe they're operations, and percussion is marketing, and the brass is sales, which of course brass is the best, right? Because, I'm a trumpet player.
There you go.
So
I will say there's something very special about an orchestra in terms of everybody understanding very well their roles and also their responsibilities.
Yeah.
And this was something that I had to adjust to in quite a big way when I started working with companies, because I didn't feel that people understood how important it was for them to take care of their own responsibilities in the way an orchestra does. I had certain expectations that weren't met in the corporate world that we had in the orchestra world. Even in a medium, let's say a B or a C orchestra, everybody understood that they had to practice their parts. They had to show up on time. They had to be, as good as they possibly could be. And it just gelled most of the time. Whereas in corporations, not so much. Right. That was actually surprising for me. And it took me some time to understand and to kind of let go of that, honestly. The level is a little bit different.
That's a really cool point. Sorry, Kelly, I'm going to say one other thing. So in thinking about the importance of all of the instrument types gelling, if the brass wants to get crazy, they can drown out the strings, and then you don't have a cohesive, awesome sounding piece. Similarly, if our silos within an organization operate as silos, we don't have a cohesive, organized organization.
Yeah, there's a famous line. I'm trying to think who it was that said it. I think it was Beecham, and he would say, "Don't look at the trombones, right? That'll only encourage them." So even though you needed to cue the trombones at a certain passage, you just kind of look at them with an eyebrow instead of giving them, a hand gesture. And I guess it's the same way in an organization where, there are certain parts of the organizations that just run really well. They don't necessarily need a lot of attention and focus. And maybe if you give them that attention and focus, they start to worry that maybe they'll start to pull back because of that. Why are you giving us what's wrong, right? And the truth is, there's something called FOD. I don't know if everybody knows what FOD is, but feet on desk, right? It's when you're in your lounge chair and you get your feet on your desk. That's really what the intent is of a leader, right? So that everybody is running themselves. And very true to a conductor as well. A conductor is not there to instruct the orchestra. The conductor is there to be in front of the music.
Yep.
To lead that way, not to tell people what to do.
Yep.
And even when they do tell people what to do, it's in a very different way than instruction. Right. Sometimes I will say sometimes they do instruct. Sometimes they'll talk about bowings, and sometimes they'll say, I want this type of an attack. So, the analogy doesn't go all the way,
Sure.
but still there is a lot of that. There's an expectation from the conductor that you all know your parts. It's not a question of that. And that's where we need to be in our organizations as well. We need to let the individuals come up to that level instead of going in and fixing all the time. Right. And if they're not reaching that level, maybe they have to find their future somewhere else. But it shouldn't be, hey, you need to do this, all this kind of pounding on people. That's just not going to work.
Right on.
It's funny how you talked about when you made the transition that orchestras come with this sort of preconceived set of everyone understands their roles at a higher level than in corporate America. I know Jim can probably back me up on this. This is why we oftentimes see companies aren't doing so well, has to do with people don't have a clear understanding of their role. And so that ambiguity, that lack of clarity in every role in the organization creates chaos or creates ambiguity, and then people fill in the gaps. And so they start making decisions that aren't aligned with where the music's going, right?
Exactly.
In your vernacular. So I think that's a really interesting point.
I agree. I just wanted to say one thing, Kenley, and that was, this is not an American phenomena. This is around the world phenomena of this, I guess, a certain lack of accountability that some cultures, and not all, but it's the accountability in an orchestra is obscene. And probably because they're constantly performing, they're constantly under the spotlight. And I don't mean just the audience, I mean around their peers, right? Because orchestra musicians are not playing for the audience, right? They know that their peers are listening in. They know all of that. So it's a very interesting phenomena how, although in the end, it is for the audience, and that's where the bottom line is. The audience, what percentage of the audience knows if they make a small error, right? And I'm talking about like a subtle thing, not even a missed note, but if they didn't play loud enough in this section, or they were a little bit off tune here, most audience members are completely oblivious to that, and that's fine, right? But their peers, their colleagues, they know like this.
Well, that's an interesting segue, Michael. You talk about you as a conductor, you sort of know, you can hear if you're doing a good job. Help us understand, how do you know you're doing a good job coaching someone, coaching your clients, or really for anybody in a leadership role trying to coach other people? What's your take on how this music and business link comes together?
So if I'm talking about my clients, part of this is the immediacy of coaching. When you're in a dialogue with a client, you're constantly listening in, and you're also seeing in their eyes. And there's a famous conductor, Ben Zander, who talks about this as well in a masterclass, and he knows when the orchestra is in tune with him because he can see the glimmer in their eye. And I would say it's the same thing. I know that when I'm asking the right facilitative question at the right time, I can immediately see my client go, oh, and they're off. And they're thinking about all the different things that they're going to change from that epiphany, that very special moment when it just snaps for them and they realize, now I get it. And so that's when I know I'm doing a good job. It's when I see that in their eye, and I also hear the, oh.
Love that. That is really cool. So you just mentioned that glimmer in the eye to see the conductor to the symphony and you to a client. And there's been a few other cool similarities that have been mentioned. But what else between coaching and conducting is similar that you might like to shed some light on?
So I guess, one really important thing is trust, because there's nothing like the trust between an orchestra and a conductor. And you've probably seen videos with Bernstein, with Leonard Bernstein conducting, let's say, the Vienna Philharmonic, and when they do the waltzes. And there's a famous video of him just standing there and just using head gestures and eyebrow gestures and all of this. And I think probably the audience thinks he's kind of reacting in some way to the music, but he's actually leading it with that. And he can do that because they trust him. Now, if I were to get up in front of the Wiener Philharmonic, they'd probably, laugh at me if I started doing those things, because the intensity that Bernstein had was just enormous, and they trusted him. So building trust is one of the most important things, if not the most important things, that you can have with your client. Another thing that when I think about the relationship between the client and the coach is attention to detail. I have to be so on top of things. And I think my wife sometimes thinks I'm a little bit boring because, I won't party too late at night, and I'll eat certain things, and I'm constantly, in good shape and doing all those things because I need to be focused. Because every time I come in front of a client, it is a performance, just like it would be in front of an audience. So that's really a big part of it. And I also mentioned anticipation before. That whole idea of anticipating what's coming. In the orchestra, you're anticipating a melody line, and you know that you have to give a certain inflection at the right time to bring across that moment so that people get the hair on their arms pop up, right? You get the goosebumps. And it's so similar as a coach when I'm listening in and I hear something and I think, okay, that sounds a little bit out of tune. That's not in the right harmony here. Something's up. I listen a little bit more, and then I'll ask that question that just at the right moment, so that again we get that aha feeling. And those are the things that I think will help the client. And I think that's the kind of communication that I need with my client.
Love it. That's great stuff.
That's fantastic, Michael. We probably have time for one more good question, and I'm going to make it easy because I think you've really opened our minds to a lot of ways to think about your topic today. But, when you left music and started working with businesses, what surprised you the most? Because I know you have a very successful practice working with other executives. So I just want to, learn from those experiences, because I think our audience can hear that and self-evaluate a little bit in order to make them more effective leaders.
Well, I will be very honest with you. I didn't think that they would take me seriously. That was the biggest surprise, because I symphony orchestra conductor. Actually, I didn't talk so much about my career as a symphony orchestra in the first 5 or 6 years of my coaching, because I didn't think that they would see me as, a quote unquote business person. And so I kept that under wraps for the longest time. And I guess when I felt really strong about my coaching abilities, that's when I started to unveil that. But it surprised me that people listened to me. It surprised me that I was able to make an impression. I was able to give them value. Still today, it's an amazing feeling, just like it is when you finish a concert with an orchestra. It's an amazing feeling that washes over you, and I still get those feelings when I'm coaching the leaders that I work with today. It's just so I would say that is what surprised me the most. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. This has been very inspirational to me here today, and I'm hoping that when lots of people listen to this podcast or go look at the streaming show, or those that might be watching live as we speak now, are getting some what I call golden nuggets of things to think about and how to connect what you are doing in their work lives and their leadership lives. Michael, why don't you tell the audience before we let you go how they can, if they want to learn more, they want to figure out more about what you have and how to connect with you. Tell us a little bit how they can catch up to you.
Sure. Well, first of all, they can go to my my webpage. It's called ScaleYOU.org, and you can find information there. You can email me at mh@atrendia.com. Those are probably the best ways to reach me. And the third way would be going to LeanMail.com. So that's my email company as well.
Excellent. Well, Michael, we so much thank you for being with us today. Any closing comments for Michael, Jim?
No, that was awesome, Michael. I really appreciate that analogy, especially as people call food people foodies. So I guess I'm a music-y, I guess. So as a fellow music-y, that was really awesome. I love that analogy a lot.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Great to hook up with you again, KENDLEY, after so many years. I really appreciate it. Thank you both.
It's awesome.
Michael, we're going to go ahead and announce now that you're actually going to be our speaker at our next Sales Leader Roundtable, which is on April the 26th at 12 noon Eastern time. And although we'll have a different topic, we'll be talking about efficiency and productivity with LeanMail, something company you founded and something many, many companies are using in order to become more productive. We look forward to having you at the end of the month.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to that.
Good having you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for being with us. Jim, we're getting ready to wrap up and close out another show. We just mentioned our next Sales Leader Roundtable cohort on the 26th, but next month we have another special treat on the first Monday at 4:00. We have another guest, and his name is Brian Miller, and he's a sales enablement specialist and one of the leading thought leaders in that space, and runs a company that really competes with Google and Facebook. The only one that really competes with Google and Facebook in the sales enablement area. So it's going to be an exciting conversation, and we'll be promoting it on both our LinkedIn pages as the month as it draws near the first week of May.
Yeah, the content each and every month, KENDLEY, has been amazing. It's been so spectacular to be part of this. So I just look forward to the continued advancement of our knowledge and skills.
I appreciate you, Jim. Always good to have you as a host. And to our audience, we look forward to seeing you next month on the first Monday at 4:00 Eastern time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for joining us today. You are now eligible to attend the peer-to-peer professional development network of the Sales Leader Roundtable. It is held on the fourth Wednesday of each month at 12:00 noon Eastern Standard Time. For an invitation, email us at info@salesleaderroundtable.com or visit us at www.salesleaderroundtable.com. Our next show is scheduled for the first Monday of each month. We hope you will join us again.